Dr. Roberts, so much stuff has happened over the weekend, and I put a post on Facebook. I want to share with you what I said and the amount of and the feedback that I got from it. I wrote along the lines of Trump lost his presidency after he bombed Iran, and the MAGA movement is dead. And I had so many people attack me for that, saying I'm stupid. I mean, not directly stupid, but I have no intelligence. And most of them were in the older generation, like my parents' age, in the 70s, upper 60s, 70s, boomers. And I'm curious, why do you think these people, you're older, but you don't think that way? Why do these people think this way?
Well, Mike, the older MAGA Americans, they're very patriotic. And it's very easy to propagandize, deceive, and indoctrinate um, patriotic people. And so they have been subjected for many, many years to the perfidy of Iran. It goes all the way back to the Carter administration when the Iranian Revolution overthrew our puppet ruler, the Shah of Iran, and established a religious-based republic. And one of the things that the Iranian revolutionaries did was to seize our embassy and hold the embassy personnel hostage. This was in the 70s during the Carter uh, regime. Well, this really upset American patriots that our embassy had been violated and our people were being held. And one consequence was the military talked Carter into a rescue operation. We were going to land troops with helicopters in the desert, and then somehow we're going to come to the embassy and take it and rescue the people and fly everybody out. And unfortunately, the helicopters crashed into each other and there was a big disaster. And it was a worse embarrassment for the Patriots. I've always wondered if the military staged it in order to get rid of Carter. you know, he may have been too much into peace to suit them. Uh, but anyhow, it's the patriotism, Mike. They believe that America has enemies and that we have to stand up to these enemies. The world, there's always somebody out to get us, and that we have to deal with them. So it's interesting you said it was mainly older people. I think the MAGA movement is split now. I think about half of them approve of the attack, and the other half are complaining and don't approve. And I do think that, in a way, Trump has weakened himself because I think it has, as you said, fractured the MAGA American movement. People didn't expect him to get us in more wars. He was supposed to get us out of wars. So I think that's the answer. It's just patriotism. And you have to understand, most of these people, they don't know anything about world affairs or world events or why this or why that. They wear the flag on their sleeve. And that's particularly true of conservatives. So any sort of, they always fall for the external enemy.
I mean, I was getting comments like, "Do you want to get nuked?" Now that they've been taking out their facilities have been taken out, you and your family are safe. These are the responses I was getting from this doctor, and so now I'm not going to get nuked. and they've been chanting death to America, and they've been killing our soldiers for years, and that's why we needed to do this. Not we, they, because I have no part of this. They needed to do this.
Well, it's not clear that what will happen. I think the Iranians will pursue Israel and not the U.S. In fact, we now have some very serious people, analysts, who actually pay attention and follow these events in real time. And a number of them, Mike, have concluded that the attack was nothing but political theater. It now seems obvious that the attack did zero damage to the so-called underground sites. It also now seems obvious that there was nothing in these sites. The Iranians had removed anything of value beforehand and have them somewhere else, and we don't know where. Um, and there are some people who pay close attention have concluded that the reason there was no Iranian air resistance or to the American bombers was that Trump and Iran had worked out a deal that in exchange for letting Trump have a successful PR event, he could fly in, drop bombs where they did no damage, and leave without getting shot down. And in exchange for this PR uh, gift, Trump promised not to do any more attacks or any real attacks. So I don't know where the truth lies, but it does look a lot like political theater, and it looks like something Trump had to do to quiet uh, the Israeli lobby, the Netanyahu, the pressure on him. Um, the question really is, uh, will it succeed in quieting Israel? And I think what the real threat that we are witnessing in the Middle East is that the Iranians have far more missiles than the Israelis. And the Iranians are concentrating on using up the Israeli missiles. As it was explained to me by people who allegedly know, one incoming missile takes 4 or 5 uh, missiles to intercept it. And so far, Iran has been using its old missiles and drones, but has a huge stockpile of new missiles, hypersonic missiles that the Iron Dome is unsuccessful at intercepting. And so in 10 days, Israel is devoid of missiles and and would be totally at Iran's mercy. And so, with this in mind, the Iranian leadership are just ignoring what they may have been complicit in, that is, a political theater attack. And they will do nothing to attack the American bases because they think they've got Israel on the ropes. Now, what would the consequence be if Israel is unable to defend itself? Clearly, then Trump would be forced to intervene and we would get into the war. So it looks like the Iranian strategy puts the situation off, but that in the end, Trump will have to come rescue Israel from suing for peace. That, I think, is a realistic assessment of what the situation is. Israel is outmatched, and this will tell in the next, say, 10 days. And already we see the Iranians doing significant damage. They've destroyed two Mossad headquarters. They've destroyed research facilities. And of course, parts of Tel Aviv are starting to look like Gaza. And so this is not working for Israel. And I think the Russians will also pressure the Iranians to leave the United States out of it. And whether the Russians can pressure the Iranians to stop their attacks in response to the Israeli attack, I don't know. It doesn't do any good to pretend that you're not at war, which is what Putin and the Chinese leader, they pretend that this isn't really a war, that they're not at war, that the attack on the Russian strategic triad was not an act of war. I wouldn't be surprised if Trump himself had the U.S. Navy close the Strait of Hormuz. The official explanation would be, oh, this is to prevent Iran from selling oil, and so they'll go broke. They won't have any money. But of course, the real purpose would be to prevent China from receiving its oil supply. My understanding is a very large percentage of Chinese oil comes from Iran. So if the United States Navy closed the strait, China would simply be cut off. That's what Franklin D. Roosevelt in the 1930s did to Japan. He just cut them off from oil supply. That's what forced the attack on Pearl Harbor. So what the Chinese would do, I don't know, but I could see Trump wanting to close it. And so when I read that the parliament in Iran had voted to close the strait, I was thinking that the Iranians would do better and just let us do it because we would be blamed, and then it would help the Chinese realize that they can't pretend that there's not a target on their back too. Whether the Iranian parliament's vote means anything depends on the supreme leader and his council. They have to give the approval, or else the vote doesn't go through. So we'll see what they do, but if they're well advised, they won't close the strait. I'm almost certain the neoconservatives will be lobbying Trump as the next punishment for Iran to close the strait. And of course, that will punish China, which is one of our purposes. So we'll see how these things develop. My own view is all the official narratives are wrong. And all of this claim of Trump of a great military strike, only America can do this, blah, blah, blah. We didn't do anything. Those attacks allegedly on the nuclear facilities were meaningless. They did nothing. They had no effect on anything, and it's entirely possible Iran was complicit in them, knowing that it was a face-saving thing for Trump that did them no real damage.
This episode is brought to you by McIlvaney Financial Group. Their advisors bring a depth of knowledge and experience that allow them to serve their clientele with care, ensuring their financial needs are met now and in the future. Personally, I'm not saying cash is worthless, but you can see what's happening. It's worth less every year. Gold is the opposite. Click on the promo link in the show notes or go to www.mcilvaney.com/coffeeandamike. So I have a couple of questions in regards to that. One, there are 9 countries in the world that have nuclear weapons. And I was listening to another podcast this morning. I didn't get all the way through it, but they were talking about how, in relation to Iran not having a nuke, a lot of countries could have the capabilities. Its technology has been around for 80 plus years, but they don't. Iran, do they really need a nuclear weapon to destroy Israel? Because from what you're saying, they could just keep firing missiles.
Yeah, no, they don't need. The only reason countries need nuclear weapons, and one of the Russian commentators in Moscow made this point the other day, is that if you fall afoul of the West and you're under pressure, you need nukes to be able to stand up for yourself. And so the argument of the Russian commentator is that this attack on Iran uh, will encourage Iran to go ahead and develop the bomb. Now, if this attack was just political theater, then Iran will not be encouraged. But if now the political theater is over, Iran succeeds in humiliating Israel, and Trump has to go save Netanyahu, uh, and we actually start making real attacks on Iran, that, of course, would lead them to make the bomb. Whether it can be made as quick as the propaganda here says, I don't know. But what tends to happen when countries, if they feel they're under threats that they cannot stand up to, they want nukes. It's like Pakistan. They're overshadowed by India. India got nukes, so Pakistan got nukes. So I think that Iran may find itself in that position. It depends on the extent of American hostility and intervention. And what I find sad about the whole affair is that it's all Putin's fault. Putin, President of Russia, is the person who green lighted the attack on Iran when he announced that the security agreement that Russia had with Iran does not include military aid. So that was Putin saying, I'm out of it, Russia's out of it. And that then was the green light. If people actually thought that there was some kind of a mutual security pact between Iran and Russia, they would be very hesitant to be attacking Iran, because what might Russia's response be? I think that Iran was badly treated by its allies, Russia and China. They both distanced themselves when all they needed to do was to be uncertain about where they stood. Or if they really wanted to be completely sure there would be no attack, they simply announced that that Iran was covered by their nuclear umbrella. There would have been no attack. I've stressed for many years that the only reason we have all this instability in the Middle East, due to Israel's determination that we destroy Iran for them, just as we destroyed Iraq and Syria and Libya and Somalia and Lebanon. The whole reason for this is the absence of a Russian, Iranian, Chinese mutual security pact. If there was a mutual security pact, nobody is going to take on those three at once. And so the whole issue of the Middle East would be settled. It would be peaceful. You can't possibly go to war with Russia, China, and Iran at the same time. But there's an inability, it seems to me, on the part of the Russian and Chinese governments to understand that the target's on their back too, that they also targeted. And what we are witnessing is the inability of the countries that are under our attack. They can't get together, so they get knocked off one by one. The Muslims have always preferred to kill one another than to fight their enemies. So they get knocked off. Um, Iraq's knocked off. And then Libya's knocked off, and Somalia's knocked off, and Syria's knocked off, and Lebanon, Hezbollah knocked off. And now it's Iran's turn. And of course, that leaves Saudi Arabia. And then the other day, Netanyahu announced at a press conference that the list of 7 countries had now expanded to 8. He included now Pakistan. Well, you know who the 9th country is? It's Turkey. Well, if all of these countries had realistic leaders, people who could face reality rather than cringe before reality, which they apparently do, and they united, then it couldn't have been touched. Couldn't possibly have been touched. So this, I think, is the reason that the Israelis and the Americans expect success. That the countries that are walking around with targets on them are unable to form some form of protective coalition. And I read yesterday where another Russian analyst said, if Iran falls, Russia's next. Well, why doesn't Putin realize that?
Has Russia and China then backed away from Iran?
I think they think that somehow all this will pass away. China has often thought that they could, they've always thought they can outlast their opponents. Just don't exhaust yourself fighting them. Just wait them out. Um, uh, Russia, it seems to be they have this great reluctance not to somehow be part of the West. So they don't really want the conflict. And so they don't want the conflict. They can't face up to the reality. I mean, look at the way Putin's conducted this stupid war in Ukraine all this time. It's almost like he doesn't want a victory because it will prevent some kind of Russian eventual acceptance in the West. Now, let me ask you, this is not live, is it?
No, uh-uh.
Can you put this on hold a minute?
Yeah.
Because I've got workmen out there and they're beating on the door, so something's happened.
Okay.
I've got, all right?
Yep.
Just put it on hold a minute. I'll be right back.
Okay.
And we'll make up for it on the other end.
All right, we had a brief pause for a second, and we're back. So one thing I want to ask you too is, if this was political theater that what occurred on Saturday night, Israel has to be aware of this.
I would think.
So knowing that this is political theater, and Iran knew, and the United States gave them, ample amount of time, wouldn't Israel? And maybe I'm oversimplifying this. Wouldn't Israel be mad, angry about this? That this was nothing was accomplished?
No, I don't think so because look, who knows? Nobody knows this. Think about all the people that jumped on you for your remarks. Well, they clearly think it's real, and that's what the way the media has treated it. The most impressive aspect of this is the way the Trump hating American media is making him a hero. You see, So I think what we see here is Trump has gone over to the dark side. He has realized that his success depends on the ruling establishment, how they interpret what he does, how they present him. So he commits political theater that they like. You see this, the American establishment, just like Netanyahu, wants Trump involved in the Iranian thing. So they have got him to make an attack. So he's already got one foot in the door, even though he said, that's it, we're done. He's got one foot in the door. So they present it as a great success. So Trump can see, hey, look, my enemies are helping me. I think he's already crossed the line and gone over to the establishment. And if you look at the nature of his government, all of them are Zionists. Um, did you see where the State Department spokeswoman the other day said that America is the greatest country second to Israel? Well, now imagine a State Department official saying Israel's greater than America. Well, the dynamics, the politics of it, everything in the end comes back to politics. Um, who are the people who can stick with causes or stick with them the longest? Ideologues, ideological movements. But you see, in the end, even the French revolutionaries, they gave up on on sticking to the cause and got Napoleon an emperor. So, uh, if you if you're not if you're not part of an ideological movement, you've got very little staying power. And Trump, I think, has now split the MAGAs, and he's under criticism from the people that disapproved of more wars, and he has the approval of the ones that criticized you for your statement. Um, and I think that Trump realizes that the establishment has more power than the MAGA Americans who don't want war. And I think the whole Trump thing is now over.
So you agree with my statement of he ended his presidency and the MAGA movement is dead?
Yeah, yeah, that's my conclusion. I wouldn't say the movement's dead. I would say it's split. The MAGA movement is split. And so I'm not sure where J.D. Vance will come out on this. I just don't know. If you look at him, he looks disturbed. And of course, we saw Trump turn on Tulsi Gabbard because Tulsi reported that the intelligence, she's the director of national intelligence, and she reported that the American intelligence service has no evidence that Iran is making nuclear weapons. So the charge is like the one we heard about Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction, which did not exist, and which the weapons inspectors told us that that's where Scott Ritter came from. Scott Ritter, who's prominent now on podcasts explaining what's going on, he was the weapons inspector who told President Bush there's no such thing as Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction, but they didn't want to hear it. So Trump didn't want to hear what Tulsi Gabbard said, and he responds to his own national security advisor that I don't care what she says. Well, it's not her saying it. She's reporting what the intelligence agencies are feeding her. So Trump only cares about what Netanyahu says. And Netanyahu knows better than U.S. intelligence. So you can see that the system is breaking down already. And I don't know, what the outcome is going to be. I think that, as I've said, that Putin and the Chinese have made a serious strategic blunder. You see, who wants to be Russia's ally? Who would trust Putin now? He turns his back on Syria, and now he turns his back on Iran. If I was China, would I trust an alliance with Putin now? What's a Russian alliance worth? You know, I wonder if they'll start having trouble with Belarus. It's it's you don't do well by causing people to be doubtful of you, and I think Putin had already caused certain elements in the Russian military to be doubtful. Remember Prigozhin and the Wagner Group? Uh, they said, "Why are we taking casualties? What are these restraints on us? We want to fight and win, get this over with." And then later, the Chechen leader said the same thing. And there are indications that discussion in Russian TV and talking programs and commentary and the military are beginning to express doubts about all the lack of resolution on the part of the Kremlin, who is prepared to hold peace negotiations that they know are pointless. I mean, look what happened to Iran. They were holding peace negotiations with the Americans when the attack happened. So clearly, the Americans can't be trusted. So why is Putin so keen on negotiations? And Putin himself has said over and over that the Americans have broken every treaty they ever made, that the agreements mean nothing. So why does he want another one? There's so much that doesn't make sense. It's very difficult to, I mean, now you can say it's very simple to understand. Nobody wants a nuclear war. And, well, I can't say nobody, but certainly the Russians and Chinese don't, and the Iranians don't. So they will put up with a great deal just to avoid a conflict that could go nuclear. And maybe Washington and Israel and the conservatives know this and are taking advantage of it.
What do you think the future of Israel is?
They've been, for what, 75 years, they've succeeded in stealing an entire country bit by bit, and no one ever doing anything about it. And now we have Gaza, complete total ruin, and Gazans starving to death and dying of disease, and the Israelis won't let spies in. So, and nobody cares. Nobody does anything about it. But we get all so upset if one or two people somewhere else get killed. But it doesn't matter how many people and how many Palestinians get killed. Nobody cares. And Netanyahu portrays Iran in terms that apply to Israel's treatment of Palestine. And no one calls him on that. So I think as long as Israel has such uh, strong control over the United States and Western Europe in general, and even Russia. I noticed that one of the first things Putin said was that Russia was very much concerned with Israel's survivability. He didn't say anything about being concerned with Iran's survivability. So it seems that, and Putin's excuse is, well, 2 million Israelis are Russians. They're Russian Jews, and we're loyal to Russians wherever they are. And that's his excuse. But of course, they left Russia for Israel, so they're not still Russians. So I don't know what to make of it, um, but it it's not going to work out well because it's all based on denials of reality, fabricated explanations, irresolution on one side, determination on the other. Uh, how that plays out, as it's playing out, it's not going well for Iran or China or Russia. And I don't think it's going well for Trump at home. And I think that Trump is moving into the establishment camp because that guarantees him success.
I've made this. I haven't made a prediction on here, but in talking to people, and I'll say it, and we'll see if it comes to fruition. But by the end of Trump's term, I don't know that he'll be hated, but he will be. It'll be get to a point where you will barely see him anymore, and because people will have lost um, just his flair, his. I think people the act will have gotten old by the end of this term.
That's a possibility. I had great hopes for him, and but I I don't see signs that those hopes were justified. I mean, he did a good thing when he released the January 6 prisoners, the people who had been falsely prosecuted and imprisoned. That was a good thing. And he did a good thing by uh, trying to curtail, I don't know how successful it's been, the DEI discrimination against white heterosexual males that was the policy throughout the federal government, including the military. We had even the Secretary of Defense in the Biden regime announced that all promotions for white males were on hold until they had expanded the ranks of DEI. So this is a violation of the 14th Amendment and of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and nothing was done about it. So I think that was a good thing that Trump took a stand like that. And I think it's a good thing that he took a stand on the border. As far as I understand, he has managed to essentially close the border. I do not think it will be possible to deport very many of those millions that have been let in. Uh, just, uh, just think about it. How do you go about deporting millions of people, particularly when the judiciary rules that each one has to have a hearing? It can't be done in a presidential term. So I don't think deportation. They'll have some, you know, few deported, particularly if they're criminals. But I think the immigrants are here to stay. But if he's closed the border, at least we've reduced the rate at which we will be replaced. It'll take a bit longer. But so we can't say he's done nothing. Um, and it could well be that feeling he's blocked by the American judiciary and he can't proceed with a lot of his agenda to clean out the federal government. He can't even manage his own executive branch without the Democrats putting stops to it. The same with his deportations. He may decide that he'll be the war president and take advantage of American patriotism, which always supports wars, or enough Americans like that support wars. It splits his movement, but it gives him, and the media will never damn him for overstating his success in war. The media is partly a tool of the military security complex, and they love to have enemies in wars. It's profitable. If they don't have enemies in wars, they don't have a budget and power. So if you get blocked in one direction, you go in another. And that could be the reason the establishment didn't really try to block him from assuming the presidency. They may have said, look, he won't be able to do much. And you know what? It has another advantage. His failure will demoralize his supporters, and they'll give up and go home and be quiet and accept whatever we do to them. So if we look at it in that way, in the way you're looking at it, the greatest disaster of Trump will be the demoralized Americans who give up and say we can't do anything. We get a tough guy, it's for us, we're pretty men, nothing happens. Old boss, a new boss, same as old boss. That's the saying, right? New boss, same as old boss.
Yeah, and that's where people were so celebratory, celebrating his winning the election, and I said, "There's nothing to celebrate here," and not that I want things to go well, but you have to be objective and look where we're at, and I share the sentiment of what you just said. I mean, you obviously described it better than I could have, but you know, what can he really do? And at this point, you're seeing who he is. Are you concerned with all the people that have been let in here for some type of unrest, false flag, cyber attack, something?
No, I think if there are any of those, there'll be FBI, CIA orchestrations to keep the war fever up. You see, um, I don't think the people that came here are interested in that. They're just trying to find a different life with less uncertainty in it. I actually sometimes think I actually would prefer to keep all the immigrant invaders and deport the white liberals. I see the real threat, the white liberals. Uh, they're the ones who uh, preach that white people are racist and men are misogynist, and they're the ones that insist on all the destructive programs in the schools, teaching the little kids about critical race theory and aversive racism and that they're born in the wrong bodies. It's not the immigrant invaders doing that. That's the educated white liberals. And so it comes back to the universities. We've lost the universities. The universities are a huge threat to the United States because they destroy the belief system. They destroy the structure of beliefs that constitutes the society. So to me, all the enemies are at home, and they're essentially the white liberals. And you can't do anything about them. And you can't do anything about the education system. And it's lost because all of this anti-American, anti-Western civilization is all now institutionalized in the faculties. It's and it's in the not just in the bachelor's degrees, but in the graduate degrees, it's in the PhD training, so that the replacement teachers are even worse than the ones we have. And you have a situation where people, parents, who complain at school board meetings that their kids are being indoctrinated and taught that they're racist and born in the wrong body. And the FBI puts these parents on the list, domestic terrorist. So if you look at it honestly and realistically, we've lost the institutions. And there's no way to turn this around. How are we going to recreate in youth and new generations confidence and belief in Western civilization? Who's going to teach it? There's nobody left that believes it in the universities. This is the real situation. And it's in many ways it's very problematic and puzzling because how can you go to war with a foreign country when your own people of the younger generations are not patriotic, who think that white people are racist and have done bad things to people of color and all the rest? You see, when the people who criticize you, who, like you say, they're 60, 70, 80 years old, when they die, that's the end of the patriots. They're not being replaced. The school system does not turn out a patriotic American. It turns out one full of guilt, self-doubt, no confidence, particularly if they're white heterosexual males. They know from the day they get in school that somehow they are second class. So that's the real problem, as I said. Um, I think that eventually Putin and the Chinese will get us into a nuclear war because by not showing any strong signs of resistance, without making it clear that they can't be run over, they invite the attacks that eventually force them into the ultimate war. And I think that's what's happening. And Russians are now beginning to say that. You know, the few thoughtful commentators, Russia didn't have very many. Most of them can't really face up to the reality. It's unpleasant. They don't want to hear it. They have hopes, you know, and the hopes are unrealistic. And I mean, look at Putin still continuing peace talks. What for? It's completely pointless. It's obvious. They can't give up these sort of misguided utopian hopes, and so they appear as irresolute and lack of confidence and people who won't do anything. And then Putin tops it off by saying an attack on Russia's strategic triad is not an act of war, it's a terrorist act. That way he doesn't have to do anything. So think about it, Mike. We've got wars everywhere, wars going on all over us, and nobody declares them. So if you don't declare it, you can pretend like it's not a war. But they are wars. They're wars, and they're not declared, so they're not wars. Well, that's something that very easily can get out of hand.
Last question. What about the future of Iran?
I don't know. Uh, the Iranians were foolish like the Russians and let all kinds of Western financed NGOs operate. You may remember it was some years ago now. We almost pulled off a green revolution in Iran. We had a candidate that ran for president, and we had paved the way with all these NGOs. Um, it didn't succeed, but it came a lot closer than I would ever have thought that the Ayatollahs would have permitted. Um, so I don't know if the people uh, are they going to stand with the government because they're under attack, or are they going to say we got to get rid of this government because if we didn't have it, they wouldn't be attacking us? I don't know. I don't know anything about it. I was invited some years ago to come over and meet with the leadership and all that, and I just said it's not a good idea. And they were already calling me a Russian agent, so I didn't want to be called an Iranian agent on top of that. If you tell the truth, you get in trouble. There's no way around it. Um, and so if you are employed or you're on a university faculty, you simply cannot tell the truth. You have to be independent. And even then, if you tell too much truth, they'll still find some way to get you. So the kinds of threats that I see they're the internal threats, and we are dying we already did as a nation, because a nation without a homogeneous population is not a nation. If it's not an ethnic basis for the country, it's not a nation. It might be a country, but it's a Tower of Babel. Germany was Germans. French were French. The British were British. The Americans were ethnic Europeans, largely English. So they have something in common. They can be united. But when you have every kind of ethnicity and their own values, their own mores, their own behavior patterns, their own way of understanding things, you no longer have a nation. And that's what we are. And it'll get worse um, as the young immigrant invaders multiply. So the whole process of assimilation that we used to have, they dismantled it years ago. It worked because the people were largely European ethnicities. And even though they were different, an Irishman is not Polish, you know, and an Italian is not British, and so on. But they all had a common culture in many ways. There was a European culture. And so it was possible to assimilate people. Well, today there's no commonality in the cultures and there's no effort at assimilation. And they come in such huge numbers as they don't need to assimilate to be successful. They have their own communities. And Spanish is now essentially an official language. So these kinds of problems are really what everybody's attention should be on. Instead, they're on Iran and Iran having to do what we say or they get attacked more. If you notice, negotiation for Trump and for the United States, negotiation means do what we tell you or else. That's what negotiation is. That's what Trump told Iran. It's what he tells Putin. Agree to this or more sanctions. And they tell Iran, agree to this or we'll kill your leader. That's not negotiating. That's imposing your hegemony. And most Americans think that's fine, that somehow we have the right to be telling everybody what to do. And if they don't do it, we should get them. And this is a very warlike position. And I think war, bigger wars, I mean, we've had a lot of wars, bigger wars have come out of it. Once again, what have we done in the 21st century? We've destroyed 5 countries for Israel, for Israel. And now Israel's in the process of getting us to destroy the 6th. And Netanyahu is already added to the list of 7, Pakistan, and I'm sure Turkey will be next. And what's to stop us from doing this? Nothing.
Where can people find you, Doctor?
Just on the website. It's just paulcraigroberts.org.
As always, I enjoy our conversations. I know it probably won't be too long before we talk again. The world's moving so fast, and I always like to hear your insights of what you think, what's occurred, and where we go from here. So thank you.
Okay, Mike. Look forward to talking to you again.
Mic drop.